Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some people are drawn to home remedies and alternative therapies, while others stick to what their doctor prescribes? Well, a brand new study dives deep into the personalities behind these choices. And it turns out there is more to it than just what you read on the internet. This is pretty fascinating because we often think of health decisions as purely logical or based on scientific evidence. But this research tells us our very core personalities might steer us towards certain ways of managing our health. The big question they wanted to answer was, what parts of our personality are linked to choosing traditional, complementary, and alternative medicine? Or TCM for short. So TCGAM is anything that's not your standard doctor visit or prescription. Think herbal remedies, acupuncture, yoga for healing, or even more spiritual approaches. It's super common with surveys showing loads of people use these therapies, often alongside regular medicine. And that's why this research is important. While TCGAM can sometimes be helpful, it is not always harmless. Some therapies haven't been proven effective, others can have side effects, and sometimes people might delay or even avoid life-saving conventional treatments. So, knowing who is more likely to turn to TCGAM helps us understand these decisions and potentially guide people towards safer choices. Long-lasting research in personality psychology demonstrates that stable individual differences play an important role in shaping health-related behavior. Tempelken now, personality psychology has shown for a long time that our personalities, the stable ways we tend to think and feel and act, really influence our health behaviors. Things like how we see health risks, how we process medical information, and ultimately what health practices we choose. So it makes sense that our personality could also influence whether we lean towards TCM. Scroll the field lacks a quantitative synthesis of evidence. Tempelken, the problem was, while many studies looked at this, there wasn't a clear big picture of what the evidence actually showed. A previous review found that something called openness to experience, which is about being curious and open to new ideas, seemed to be linked to TCGAM, but it didn't look at personality in a super deep way. This new study aimed to fix that. Scroll therefore in this study, we also account for the recently proposed model of proneness to plebs, labeled disintegration. Tempelken, this study didn't just stick to the usual personality models, they also included something called disintegration, which is a newer concept related to how some people might be more prone to unusual beliefs or even psychotic-like experiences and behaviors. They were particularly interested in this because previous research hinted it might be linked to TCGAM. Scrollby conducted a systematic review and meta-analysis examining the relation between personality traits and preference for TCM Tempelken. So, how did they find this out? They did something called a systematic review and meta-analysis. This is like being a super detective for research. They went through tons of studies, both published and unpublished, sifted through all the data, and basically crunched the numbers from all of them together to get the most reliable answer possible. Scroll-the protocol was pre-registered with Prospero CRD 423442684 prior to the original database search. Fun Tempelken, and they did it really carefully. They even registered their plan beforehand, so they weren't just making it up as they went along. This makes the results much more trustworthy. Scroll database search was done in 2 phases. Tempelken, they searched a bunch of major academic databases to find as many relevant studies as they could. They looked for keywords related to TCGAM and personality traits. They even asked around in professional networks for any studies that might not have been officially published. Scrollability criteria, this meta-analysis included quantitative, observational, and experimental studies that examine TCM-related variables, all covered under the umbrella term TCGAM preference, expressed through attitude towards TCGAM past or present TCGAM use, intention to use TCGAM effectiveness, ratings regarding both physical and mental health, as well as their associations with personality measures. Tempelken to be included, a study had to have numbers. Meaning it was quantitative, it needed to look at TCGAM in some way, whether people were using it, thinking about using it, or had positive or negative feelings about it. And crucially, it had to measure personality traits. They excluded certain types of studies, like those with only kids or those that were just reviews themselves. Scroll the final dataset comprised 35 papers. reporting 35 studies and a total of 405 effect sizes. Templeton, after all that searching and sifting, they ended up with 35 studies that met their criteria. These studies included a wide range of people, from general populations to specific patient groups, adding up to over 44,000 participants, and they extracted a whopping 405 pieces of information, or effect sizes about how personality and TCM were linked. Scroll4 raters conducted a quality check of all included studies using a quality assessment tool developed by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, ND. Templeton, they also checked the quality of each study. They rated them as good or fair, and thankfully, none were considered poor quality. This whole process is about making sure the building blocks for their big analysis are solid. We recorded the personality model and personality traits assessed in each study. See Table 1 Templeton, they were looking at different personality models, most commonly the Big Five, which includes traits like openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. They also looked at the hexaco model, which adds honesty, humility. And importantly, they included that disintegration trait we talked about. Scroll effect sizes were categorized by personality traits as follows. Neuroticism, K70, extroversion, K71, openness to experience, K81. Agreeableness, K68, conscientiousness, K68, honesty, humility, K5, schizotypal traits, proneness to plebs, K40, and other K2 said. Templeton, so, what did they actually find when they crunched all the numbers? The correlation for honesty humility was of the same magnitude. However, disintegration showed a low positive correlation with preference for TCCAM. Templeton harassed the punchline. For the classic Big Five traits like openness, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism, the links to TCCAM preference were pretty much negligible. That means they found very little connection. Even honesty humility, a trait from the hexaco model, didn't show a strong link. Overall, the moderators we included did not explain substantial between study heterogeneity Table 3, and each moderator was significant for only one trait. At most I Templeton, but then there was disintegration. This trait, which relates to proneness to unusual beliefs and magical thinking, showed a small but significant positive association with TCCAM preference. This means people who scored higher on disintegration were a bit more likely to prefer TCCAM. The relationship between disintegration and TCCAM preference was moderated by gender and the reliability of the personality measure used. Templeton, now here is where it gets more nuanced. They looked at other factors that might influence these relationships called moderators. For disintegration, they found that the link was weaker in samples with more women and stronger when the personality measures were more reliable. This suggests that how we measure these things and the gender makeup of the group can matter. The relationship between extroversion and TCCAM preference was stronger in younger samples, minus 0.003, C minus 0.001. P.004 Templeton. They also found that for extroversion, the connection to TCCAM preference was a bit stronger in younger people. This makes sense. Younger folks might be more adventurous and open to trying new things. Openness to experience was moderated by sample country, the number of items in the personality measure, and TCCAM preference type. Templeton, for openness to experience, they found some interesting twists. The link was stronger in samples from the USA compared to other countries. They also found that using more questions to measure openness led to a stronger association. And the link was only significant when they specifically looked at TCCAM use, not just attitudes or intentions. This suggests that when people actually do something, it's a stronger signal of preference for openness. The relationship between disintegration and TCCAM preference was moderated by gender and the reliability of the personality measure used. Templeton and remembered that disintegration trait. They found its link with TCCAM preference was weaker in samples where there were more women. They speculate that for women, TCCAM preference might be influenced more by social factors, while for men it might be more strongly tied to personality. Nevertheless, unexplained heterogeneity, particularly outside the honesty-humility domain, suggests the presence of additional moderators not captured by our analysis, such as the content of TCM practices, e.g. acupuncture versus herbal remedies. Templeton, an important point is that not all of the differences between studies were explained by these moderators. This means there are likely other factors at play, like the specific type of TCM being used. After all, acupuncture is very different from taking certain herbal supplements, and our personalities might connect differently to each. Scroll importantly, we observed practically no evidence of publication bias in the current dataset. Tempelkan, a really positive note from this research is that they found very little evidence of publication bias. This is crucial. Publication bias happens when studies with significant or exciting results are more likely to get published than those with, say, nothing important to report. If that were happening, the overall picture we get would be skewed. These researchers did a lot to check for this, which adds a lot of confidence to their findings. Scroll this meta. Analysis has several limitations that warrant consideration and point to directions for future research. Tempelkan now, like all research, this study has limitations. One is that most studies used the Big Five or hexaco personality models. They didn't have enough data to really compare different personality models as moderators. Also, a big chunk of the data for the disintegration trait came from just one large cross-cultural study. So, while it is promising, we need more research to really nail down what disintegration means for TCAM preference. Scroll second, regarding TCAM preference. It should be noted that TCAM use is heterogeneous across both domains and purposes. Tempelkan, another limitation is that TCAM itself is incredibly diverse. The current study couldn't break down the results by specific types of TCAM or the reasons people use them. For example, someone using yoga for stress relief might have a different personality profile than someone using herbal remedies for a specific illness. Future research could dive into these finer details. Scrollfe included studies were predominantly conducted in English-speaking, high-income countries, with approximately 40% originating from the USA, which limits the generalizability of the findings. Tempelkan, they also noted that most of the studies were from Western countries, particularly the USA. This means we need to be careful about applying these findings to people in different cultural and economic contexts, where the reasons for using TCAM might be very different, like limited access to conventional healthcare. Scrollte's meta-analysis suggests that psychological dispositions may play a role in shaping health-related choices, specifically a preference for TCAM Tempelkan. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? The most important finding is that while our common personality traits like openness and extroversion don't seem to strongly predict TCAM preference, a trait called disintegration, representing a proneness to unusual beliefs and magical thinking, does show a positive link. Scroller results underscore the need for further research to clarify the psychological correlates of alternative health-seeking behaviors across diverse populations and trait models. Tempelkan, this suggests that if someone is more likely to have unusual beliefs, they might also be more drawn to TCA. It's a fascinating insight into how our inner world influences our health choices, but it's important to remember the findings for disintegration, especially, need more research to be fully understood. It's a complex area, and this study is a great big step towards unraveling it. What are your thoughts on this research? Do you think your personality influences your health choices? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and of course subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained. See you in the next one.